Thank you very much. It is such an honor and a privilege to be here today. So I do thank you. I am going to bring up my presentation. You should be able to see it now.
Yes, we can see that, Dr. Russo.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so yes, earlier this year, well, late last year, I was, of course, watching much of, here in the United States, much of the scandals, I'll just call it. But when it deals with intelligence analysis, that is where I would kind of say I have to draw a line. When I say that, I really believe, and most of the intelligence community, I think worldwide, also feels that, political ideologies should take the back seat when it comes to intelligence analysis. So, yes, to me, critical thinking, which is really the trade craft foundation for any intelligence analyst, should be without bias. I mean, we spend much of our existence ensuring that we, as analysts, mitigate, prevent, and understand not only our own biases, but biases in information, misinformation, disinformation, and propaganda. So I started writing my second book earlier this year. Actually, my first book, Precision in Perspective, came out and just right on its heels because of what we hear about political ideology being, well, injected into intelligence. I really felt the need to really push up the timeline for its release because I think that it's really poignant to ensure that we have this conversation. And so far, it's only been out for just about 15 days now. And it's been really well received. It's not just a memoir of the intelligence scandals and bringing you up to date. It is more than that. It is to be used by intelligence analysts. And given these scenarios, here's some new frameworks, here's some new concepts to really further your own understanding of a trade craft that we should really hold dear. So I want to talk about today really what is political ideology, how it really does corrupt analysts, the analytical integrity, and how it's engineered outcome, and that's what we don't want. But practical tools like checklists, yes, structured analytical techniques, dashboards, and also dissent channels. And then ending with the implications for leaders, analysts, as well as consumers. So, the first thing I want to talk about really is that working definition of what is political ideology, because we hear about it, we hear and we know that, okay, ideology is something that, especially if we're talking about politics, it really is based on a pattern constellation of everything that we look at of liberty and equality, authority, justice, so on and so forth. But let's talk about the three components: descriptive, normative, and strategic. You know, we really only, as a society, we base a lot on the descriptive, how politics and society really kind of mesh and integrate to one another. I mean, we live our daily lives, but that shouldn't be for the intelligence analyst. I mean, I was born of the Cold War era where we didn't talk about intelligence. We didn't talk about our job. But a post 9/11 era, especially in the US intelligence community, kind of got rid of that and really ushered in that, well, we can talk about politics in the workplace. And that wasn't always the best thing. We really did normalize political ideology in our work. And this is why I think, I mean, while we have a history of it in the book, I go all the way back to the 1960s and the Gulf of Tonkin. And it really doesn't have it's an us versus them. It's a Democrat versus Republican or liberal versus conservative because every political party has had this kind of issue of injecting its political ideology into intelligence and intelligence analysis. But what I want to do is really get to that strategic part. How do we move on from is, and this is how it is, and this is how it ought to be, to this is the way that it will be in the fact that if we are able to fully uh, get rid of political ideology in our intelligence analysis. And this is a significant part of critical thinking. And I think that is the other part that has been missing from at least the US intelligence community. While we talk a lot about analysis, we don't talk enough about critical thinking. Analysis means to break apart, but that's not what an analyst should have as a primary foundation. It should be that they understand their own thought process, the metacognitive abilities. And it's thinking about your own thinking. We don't teach that. We don't want them to really know. So, why all of this should matter to anyone who deems himself an intelligence analyst? I want you to look at it from, yes, you're going to bundle issues into seemingly coherent packages. We do this on a daily basis, whether it's an assessment or it's just a decision piece for a judgment to be given to one of our senior leaders. I want to think about the compressing of complexities under stress and uncertainty. This is a daily thing that we talk about of we have so much volumes of information. We look at AI as almost good and evil in a way that AI can help us get through and give us less stress, but that it can also help with the ambiguity and mitigate the uncertainty. But that's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because with that, then we have to worry about, well, the bias and the hallucinations that can still happen with AI. We still have to have human in the loop. And this is why it's so important for our own integrity to be understood. We have to understand what it counts to have common sense or that something that is obvious. I want you to look at really the framing of the questions. When when we look at the same statute of essential security tool versus the civil liberties, uh, this is where I really look at, yes, the argument could be made for should security trump our civil rights, our civil liberties. And well, unfortunately, we saw the pandemic response of that public health frame versus the civil liberties frame. And that new question that we had been really kind of holding on to for like 19 years. Again, I look back to the post 9/11, and that's where that same statute really comes in of it was an essential tool for us to have some kind of authoritarian control. Well, we allowed intelligence to really take center stage in both instances. Why this is dangerous? Well, framing changes a lot. And we as analysts, we know we have to frame a problem, but framing also ends up being parts of confirmation bias. Uh, it's it also tells us kind of what evidence we're going to notice or not notice, who we treat as credible as a source of information, or even that we take the information as face value, can be and is a very slippery slope. we don't do enough critical thinking of, yes, where did that evidence come from? Where should I be questioning it? And is it just the evidence? Is it the information? Is it the source? How did the source come about this information? And just do I trust that source itself, not just the information that they may have primarily gained firsthand? So, I really want to look at, and I do talk about it in the book, where we set the burden of proof. Again, it's on you as the intelligence analyst. I put a lot of this squarely on intelligence analysts because as humans, we cannot and we should not be, of course, waiting for AI to do the work for us. It can't. It's not here to do the analysis. That's the human in the loop. But we've had these failures. We've predicted the predictive failures mode. We had framing creep, say, with the fall of the Berlin Wall at the end of the 1980s and the fall of the USSR. That what took us by surprise. So when we look at decision question, we have to really quietly pre-propose that there is a preferred answer. Did we, in the case of the fall of the Berlin Wall and the fall of the Soviet Union, did we want that to happen? We weren't, as the West, weren't prepared for that to happen, and set really kind of in motion for the next decade the who is the primary enemy. And we had to really look for that. And we didn't know how to react to the world as you ended up going from just two superpowers, and then you ended up with, yes, China, Iran, North Korea over the next 10, 20, 30, and here we are 35 years later. So we do have to be looking at the tempo. And that tempo, I say, is a lot of early noisy reporting. And we do say that by, well, we hear chatter. Um, these are kind of statements that I look at as if we're not ready to really understand and question the wording. I think words have consequences, and we don't pay enough attention to words that we either read or that words that we are ourselves speaking and hearing from others. So we also, and you hear the adage of read the room, that self-censor, unfiltered. Uh, some people take these at lighthearted of, well, they're not able to really read the room, or they don't really have a way of self-censoring or self-filtering. To me, this is, especially in the intelligence community and as a profession, it's a slippery slope. And this is where, again, I say over the least the last 20 years, we've had more scandals involving intelligence being corrupted and injection of directly a political ideology. So, how it enters really the intelligence shop rarely, as we see, is change this to please the president. But unfortunately, we really have. When we look back at the US presidencies of the Barack Obama administration, even the first term of Donald Trump, and then the Biden administration. And there's even times I can say it here just in the last 11 months. There are some things that I do worry about the intelligence community being brought into. We have a lot of legal hurdles to be jumping through. And unfortunately, it's political theater, but it still does significantly have harm to the tradecraft and the profession that is intelligence. George Washington, the US father of intelligence, actually warned us about the corruption of political intelligence being used against uh, opposition or even political parties. So it's not, 250 years later, these things still ring true. Uh, I worry about such words as alignment and tone and helpful products. As an intelligence analyst, yes, we want to ensure that we have the priority intelligence requirements. We're listening to and understanding what are the threats. But when we start looking at it from the analytical integrity part, this is where there's no firewall. I feel that with our agencies that are out there, we've gone away from that analytical rigor and the unbiased assessments because our ethical commitment has really waned. And I'm not talking about all doom and gloom here. I do want to ensure that we still have some guided tradecraft, that not personal or political preferences. And there is a varied way, not only analytically, like codified in our intelligence collection directive 203, 206, and 208, of course, written by the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. Those are the related directives. But those intelligence community directives are meant to kind of guide that tradecraft, but they don't go far enough. I think also ensuring that when we undergo background investigations for access to very classified information, uh, it seems almost cookie cutter. And I think this is also what got us a lot into a lot of trouble and where we're at, especially and again in the last 25 years. We've waned from those core principles of objectivity and independence and completeness and the rigorous things of our trade craft. As I started to introduce ICD 203, it is about objectivity, but as an engineered outcome. We have to have explicit sourcing. We have to have that reasoned argument. And a lot of times, don't we not have or even understand argumentation? This is where, again, in my first book, Precision, I really was trying to get people to understand proper argumentation, as well as like understanding the fallacies that as analysts, we're taught structured analytical techniques, but we're not really taught how to think uh, for ourselves. We're taught really kind of what to think. And that to me is really the tragedy of intelligence analysis, at least here in our US intelligence community. Now, when we look at, well, what's the transparent uncertainty? Yes, intelligence. I grew up with the whole cloak and dagger mindset. We couldn't talk about our job. We couldn't even really disclose to people that we were within the intelligence community, let alone what really we were working on. So, how could you be transparent? Well, within at least our work, we would. So we had confidence tied to the evidence. We could say that with high, medium, or low confidence. Well, okay, there's probabilities of percentages attached to those, but we very rarely really understand it ourselves. Do we test intelligence analysts periodically for them to remember? Well, we may have little guides all printed out at our desks that kind of remind us. I still don't think that we apply critical thinking and the philosophical aspect of really asking a lot of questions. And that's why alternative analysis is significantly important. And within a lot of products, we ask for recommendations and implications and to include alternative analysis, but it almost seems like those come secondary. Why is there not? Just like, say, with the US Supreme Court, they hear a case, they have, both the opinion and the dissent, which are looked at as equally. But we don't do that. So I, uh, General Mattis had the Marine Corps general and former Secretary of Defense here in the US really had said it quite nicely that, there are sentinels and there are guardians. He really did look at the sentinels as being the intelligence analysts, um, and that the guardians really were more the products. So when we look at guardianship, do we have any kind of, we have whistleblower protection, but it's normally not as well run as one would think. It still ends up ruining somebody's career, even though they went to do the right thing. We've seen this case over and over with the FBI just after Director Comey's firing earlier or late last year, or a couple of years ago, sorry, and then with well, his resignation, if you will. Gosh, now that's what, 7, 8 years ago. And then Christopher Wray, same thing, that the whistleblowers were not really protected. So within the book, I go over many of these, like the Iraq WMD was really an intelligence failure. And it was an over-reliance. There was a lot of political pressure from one political party and especially from one administration to get things done in order to go into Iraq. We saw this, of course, after the Iranian Revolution as well here in the United States and its policy towards the Shah. And well, what ends up happening are all these consequences. We've seen, wars launch and on the faulty premises and strategic surprise. Why should we be surprised? With strategy, why do we here in the US just kind of have strategy every 4 years? That's not strategy. That's just trying to do tactical or even maybe operational type work rather than strategic work. And really, we do see the long-term damage to the IC and its credibility over time. So two things I want to talk about really quick are the left, the right. We say left, evidence and uncertainty, sources, our base rates, our counter indicators. But then when you look on the right, it's the normative claims. Security requires X and justice demands Y. So you can see these very opposing political ideologies, and it does have a lasting chilling effect. Yes, we could say, analysis of competing hypothesis is really going to help, but again, that's framing. You can discount even if you try to do it yourself or even with a small group. You have to take into account, again, if you're going to look at it from the political ideology standpoint, you're going to have to really weigh out, are these confirmations? Is this cherry picking information? Are people really making an independent thought? And is it being taken with that in mind? So we also look at, frame switching. We don't do these kind of drills. We look at from the analytical standpoint, we just look at things as, well, we'll reanalyze it later. I mean, we really don't look at evaluating even ourselves critically from that. Okay, I get information and I'm going to analyze it and then evaluate again the source and the information itself, and then ultimately the inference of, well, what is it really supposed to mean? Um, by looking at this, do we really have everything that we need, all the tools? Well, yes, you could look at structured analytical techniques and such, but that doesn't mean that that's all the tools out there. Critical thinking, learning how to think about thinking while thinking about thinking. That is that metacognitive, and we don't teach that enough. We don't have people really get in touch with themselves on that. So I kind of gave up a example pattern that you can read through, and I want you to be thinking about it from this aspect. I'm not going to reread it for you, but if you take this example pattern, you can kind of see where the transparency language comes in, and that we really do need to start to understand a lot of the tools that we're missing for better accuracy. The ICD-3 that it's here only in the US. I'm not sure if uh, any other foreign intelligence partners like the Five Eyes. I know that they are aware of it, but do they have something of the same? When we start looking at a live checklist for every draft, we have decision question and answers. We do that key assumptions check. We want to look at that confidence rationale. We put all that together. Is that really still 100%? No, it's not. I think we've had it now for 20 something years, and it's just not doing what I believe it should. Again, I go back to the critical thinking aspect because we as humans and human in the loop with AI really have to understand our own political bias. Whether you say, well, I'm a conservative, so I'm going to think this way. Um, and especially when you're faced with problems that may be in direct opposition to your own ideology. You see that I don't say opinions or beliefs because I feel those two are too emotional words, and we need to really kind of in analytical discussions, they don't have any room. So we need to make integrity stronger. We need to look at what every day versus an analytical integrity is. It goes down to that moral character. That's how analysts used to be selected, was based a lot on their moral character. Their moral character spoke volumes. But now we have to look at this integrity as, character plus some kind of specialized methods that they have access to, or computer science, IT, engineering, and then their professional code. We ask them about how they are. The reason that this slide is so different is, in wrapping up here, is that AI and the speed and the temptation of its convenience is the new worry. It's not a threat. I don't believe it's a threat. I think that as long as we have this non-negotiables in an AI environment, it's keeping that human in a loop, but it's really understanding again that humans in that loop still need to have critical thinking skills worked every day. So here's my recommendations to both leaders and intelligence consumers. And I hope that you take this with, of course, a grain of salt. It's just three quick ones. So with that, I just want you to have these takeaways. And really, my goal is simple, but it's uncompromising. I really want to make more rigor of a routine for intelligence analysis, and that involves critical thinking. That making our integrity hard to really subvert. Really, it's again that unquestionable where I'm coming from, and then ultimately making accountability inevitable. So with that, I want to thank you very much. I know I just went a few seconds or a few minutes over. Here's my contact information if you ever need to get a hold of me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much,